Alright, in this video, I'm going to ruffle some feathers. I'm going to get under some people's skin here, cause some irritation. You see, I'm going to talk about Peter Ruckman, and I'm going to use him to preach a warning of what's to come upon this world. So I hope you bear with me, because I'm going to talk about some things for him, some things against him. So I'm going to irritate the people who are for him by speaking out against him, and I'm going to irritate the people that are against him by speaking for him. And I'm going to start off by saying that I like Peter Ruckman. I like his attitude. I like his boldness, his in-your-face, no-nonsense, straight-to-the-point attitude. He reminds me of my old man, and he's inspired me to be more bold in preaching the gospel out to others. To not care about what they think and how they're going to react, to just be a watchman on the wall, sounding the alarm no matter what time of the day or night it is. And if the people don't like how I do it, they don't like the time of the day or night, and they don't like the way that I sounded the alarm, that's on them, whether they heed the warning or not. Right? That's on them. I did my job. Right? So, I like that about him. I actually appreciate that about him. That he's going to tell you how it is. Right? But as you can see here, one of the things we're going to get into is racism. Because I saw a video title this morning, and I decided to check it out, talking about how Peter Ruckman is a false teacher, false prophet. It shouldn't be a pastor. And I hear people out who go against what I believe all the time, so that I can check myself to see if there's a hole in my boat. And sometimes a big hole is better than a little hole. Because if you go out to sea and you don't notice a big hole in the boat, it sinks pretty quick. And you can just get to shore. You can swim back, right? Where people can see you go down, they can help you. But if it's a little hole, that sometimes is a bigger problem because you go way out to sea before you know there's a problem. And then it's too late. And you're way out there and you try to turn back, it don't matter. Right? You're going to sink way out to sea. So you got to check for holes, right? And that's holes in your beliefs, your doctrine, to see if you're being hypocritical, if you're contradicting, and, fix the boat you're in. And while listening to this video, I heard some silly things. And some things that were actually good points. The silly things were talking about Peter Ruckman being racist. The first thing, it showed him drawing pictures that had to do with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and I have to cut this quick. Alright, had to take that call. Getting back to this, in part of the video, it was showing Peter Ruckman talking about Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And he was showing how these are the three main races of mankind. He's talking about Shem being the Asiatic, Japheth being the European, and Ham being the African. And he was drawing them, and he was telling the differences. Like with the Asiatics, they got the squinted eye, all have dark hair, pretty short. White people generally lighter skin, even from the Asiatics, taller, different colored eyes and hair. And from Ham, you got the blacks with the kinky hair. And he's talking about the wide nose and the big lips. And the person was saying that this is racist. I don't get what was racist about it. But apparently it was racist to talk about how the races are different. Right? I don't get how that is racist. See, racism is a bias. So let's say I'm hiring for a job and I want to hire the most qualified individual. And I get 3 applications and I see the one that is most qualified ends up being an Asian. And I'm like, I don't want to hire an Asian. So I'm not going to hire this guy, even though he's the most qualified. I'm not going to hire him. That would be racist. And then I see the other two are a little bit closer, but we want diversity, so we're going to hire this black guy. He doesn't have the same qualifications, but he's black, so we're going to hire him because he's black. That is racism because you're basing your decision with these people based on their race, not on their qualifications, not based on their character, but based on their skin color, their heredity. Not even sure if that's a word, but you know what I mean. That is racism. So if you treat people differently based on their ethnicity, that's racism. What I saw Ruckman doing was not treating anybody different than he was treating anybody else. He wasn't treating white people different from black people or Asians different from white people or black people or anything. Because he would talk about Europeans and call them frogs and spicks, Polacks and such. And then he talked about Jews as kikes, Asiatics as gooks, and then he talks about blacks as niggas. He did not like treat anybody different. He spit in everybody's face. That is not racist. Because if he spits in the face of a white person, you're like, whatever. But then he spits in the face of the Asiatic and a black person, and all of a sudden it's racist? No, that would make you racist. And there's probably some people who think what I'm saying is racist, even though I'm saying to treat everybody equally. Apparently that's racist. You have to treat white people bad and black people above good, or else you're racist. Apparently that's just how it is, right? So that's my defense on that. But at the same time, I believe he is against interracial marriage and seems to be, I can't say for certain, for segregation. Not that blacks and whites and Asians and Hispanics can't hang out and all that and work together, but their families and communities and stuff, he seems to be like, yeah, fine with that being separated, especially when it comes to marriage and the family. Um, my point of view on all of that is that I am for and against segregation. I'm for both. And what I mean by that is I'm for freedom. So let's say we have 2 black communities, 2 white communities, 2 Asiatic communities, 2 Hispanic communities. One of the black communities wants to only stick with black people and have black only businesses and schools and what have you. Have at it. Now, if white people want to do the same thing, have at it. The Asians, Hispanics want to do the same thing, go ahead. I don't think you should force them to mingle with other people they don't want to mingle with. If you think it's racist for them to only want to be around people like themselves, yeah, okay, you can call them racist. But I say they got the freedom to do that. Now, if the other community wanted to mingle with other people from each one, right? So there was one Asian, one black, one white, one Hispanic community that wanted to be by themselves, and the other one from each group wanted to mingle, I believe you should allow that, and you shouldn't force them to separate. So that's why I say I'm for and against it. And you should be equal. So if you're going to be cool with there being black only schools, which there are, then you need to be cool with there being white only schools. If you think it should go one way or the other, I mean one way but not the other, then you are racist. And yeah. Uh, but anyway, there were some other objections they were saying about this guy. And this one I can actually agree on. In First Timothy chapter 3, it talks about the qualifications of being a bishop. And it says that he is to be married to one wife, or the husband of one wife, which obviously they're married, and ruling his children and his family well to prove that he can be an overseer of the Church of God. And Ruckman's first wife left him. I'm not sure why. I looked into it, but all I could find was that there was a court case that ended up going in Ruckman's favor that went all the way to the Supreme Court in, I believe it was Alabama. And the wife was trying to instigate arguments to get show bruising so that she could, I suppose, get divorced or maybe get some kind of alimony or something. I'm not sure exactly what she was trying to do, but yes, there's women who have done things like that. And apparently, all he did was grab her wrist to defend himself, hold her against the table, hold her against the kitchen sink, and I guess she got some bruises on her wrist from what I saw, but he never hit her or anything like that. So everything went in his favor. Uh, but that shows that there's something a bit off, right? Um, Such as he was saying, I think that this woman, he married her before he was saved, went into the military, came back, and I'm not sure if she was saved or not. So the relationship was weird. That doesn't justify a divorce, but you can't force people to stay with you. If they're going to leave, they're going to leave, right? So they got divorced, and he ended up getting remarried. And this is where I start to have the issue. Because Ruckman has justified his first divorce in videos that I've watched, talking about how God divorced Israel, right? And then he gets remarried to somebody else, though. And it ends up being to somebody else's divorced wife. Apparently, he had a student, and his ex-wife, he ends up marrying her. And I was like, okay, that's a bit off, because if you're going to get divorced, you should stay single. Like Paul talks about, that it's good for you to not even be married in the first place. And if you were to get divorced or separated, it's good for you to just stay on your own, right? And then he talks about that, like again, using God to justify his divorce. I thought, started to think about it, and I was like, okay, yeah, God divorced Israel, God the Father, and he didn't go marry anybody else. And in fact, Ruckman teaches that he's going to come back and end up remarrying Israel. And by Israel, I'm talking about physical Israel, the Hebrews, the Jews, right? And it was Jesus, the Son, that marries the church. Israel is the mother that gives birth to Jesus, and you could say to the church, and the church is the bride of Jesus, just to clear that up. So they both are the husband of one wife. They've well, God the Father got divorced, but he stayed unmarried until he's going to bring back Israel. So he's not really following the example of God. Not to mention that the second wife was a divorced woman herself. And Jesus talks about uh, marrying a divorced woman is adultery. So I was thinking that was a bit odd. It's like, okay, something's wrong with that. You can't say this guy is blameless with good report. Not that anybody really is blameless, but this is pretty bad. Being to be qualified for being a preacher, or should I say, a pastor, a bishop, an overseer of the church. So I was like, all right, these people, they got a point here. They got a point. I don't know what happened with the second wife, but apparently there's a story that he was going about 50 in his automobile, and something was going on to the point where she decided to jump out of the car. Ruckman says that she's crazy. I guess you got to be a little bit crazy to do that, but at the same time, you got to be pushed to a certain point to be willing to do something like that. So I don't know the details on why they got divorced and what happened there, even though I tried to look it up. So that's a bit strange that it's kind of just hidden. But yeah, that's an issue. Then he gets a third marriage to someone who's 27 years younger. And I'm not sure if she was ever married or anything or had any children before. But yeah, that's a bit off. So I wouldn't say that he qualifies to be a pastor. But there are a bunch of people that they call Ruckmanites that basically put this guy up as an idol. He's their bridge, their ladder, their stairway to heaven. And they go through him to go to God. And it's kind of creepy. But now, does he actually promote that, or is it just people doing it? Right? Kind of like I'm making videos here, and let's say a group of people start idolizing me. Not that I'm worried about that happening, but let's just say it did. Is that my fault? I'm not promoting such a thing. Not in any way whatsoever. So if that were to happen, you can't blame me. I mean, you could try, but there's no justifiable reason to do so. I can't control other people. If I could, I'd be getting them all saved right now. But anyway, while looking for a picture to use here, I stumbled across this. I thought this was interesting. It says here, Peter Ruckman, 1921 to 2016, and it calls him a heretic. I was like, okay, I'll look at what they're saying here. This one says from the pastoral epistles. These are from books and bulletins that he wrote. He says, all black people are racist. Okay, now that's racist, right? Because he just generalized a whole group of people. And he says they have color consciousness that affects every decision they make in life. And they make decisions on the basis of color. And to an extent, I can see with a lot of people, this is actually true. You can see this in politics, in entertainment, and all the movies and all that stuff. You can see that tends to be the case. But it's not all of them. So to make that as a generalized statement is racist, but to say that there are groups of black people that are like this and are pushing their agenda, that is true. So I can't defend his point of view, but agree that there is a group of black people who are like this, no doubt. Just like there's groups of white people who are white supremacists, right? But that's not every white person. If you think all white people are white supremacists, then you also are racist. All right, this next thing here is very controversial from the book of Exodus. He says here, the destruction of a child in the fetal or embryonic stage is not counted as murder. And I bet a lot of you saying it is murder. But Ruckman actually makes a good point about this. And he says, all right, for all these people who have abortions, do you think they should face the death penalty? And I'm betting you're saying no. So then you don't think it is murder. Because if it was murder, you would say they would have to face the death penalty. Because that's what the Bible requires. Life for life, right? So you don't really think that it is. You kind of halfway do, right? The other point he makes about this is that Adam didn't become a living man until he was given the breath of life. And that's the same thing with the child. The child doesn't really become a living soul until it takes breath. Not sure if I quite agree with that, but it's a good point nonetheless, so I get why he believes what he would believe there. So, don't quite defend him, but I don't condemn him for it either. Because, hey, maybe he's right on this and I'm wrong. Especially when he comes to the whole murder thing, because I don't think people who have had abortions should be put to death. But then maybe I'm being too soft. Maybe they should. But that's a good point. This next thing here, from the reaction to critics, I like this one. He says, I goad them, I irritate them, I throw rocks at them, I upset and antagonize them, I ridicule them, and then I fill their hides with buckshot. How does that make him a heretic? He's not saying he literally shoots them and throws rocks at them. He's saying it metaphorically, that he is being the salt of the earth, preserving the truth and irritating those who are against him, right? So he's not saying he's literally throwing rocks at them and shooting them. So what's wrong with him saying that? You don't think Jesus irritated the Pharisees and the Sadducees? You bet your ass he did, because they ended up putting him to death. You don't put somebody to death who didn't irritate you in some way. So why they're upset about this and say this is heretical doesn't make sense. It's like they're on the side of the Pharisees and Sadducees when they do something like that, because Jesus, like this next thing, where it says name calling is perfectly proper when identifying and describing anything or anybody. Like there's people who get upset from name calling. Like if somebody lies about me, I call them a liar, and sometimes they get upset. Like, hey, you're name calling. I was like, well, they lied. That makes them a liar. Jesus called people out for what they were: hypocrites, actors, children of the devil, vipers, children of hell. Right? He called people names. He called them fools, slow of heart and mind. as in stupid. The same thing calling them simple. They're stupid, right? You call it how you see it. Now, if you're just calling people names for no reason, okay, you're a jerk, right? And I used a name because if somebody's doing that, they're a jerk. And now I'm name calling, right? But it's a way you describe somebody who's doing something like that. They're a jerk. But if somebody calls out a liar for being a liar and a hypocrite for being a hypocrite, a dumbass for being a dumbass, what's wrong with that? If they're just saying it because you disagree with them, okay, there's a problem, right? Uh, Now, keep this in mind that some people who don't like this have said some really strange things about me. Like, I've preached to the Seventh day Adventists about the Bible, about the gospel. Jesus Christ died for your sins, was buried, and rose again the third day. And you're saved by grace through faith, that not of yourselves, as a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. You're saved by God's imputed righteousness, not righteous works of your own. That's how he saved us. And they say that I'm of the devil. And it's like, whoa, I'm preaching the gospel. And they say I'm of the devil. So I go, well, what's the gospel? And they can't tell me what it is. Oh, you get a second chance to try to keep the law to be saved. And then you fail. Oh, well, you get actually an infinite amount of times to try again, is what is the gospel. Or, you get as many times as you got until you die, which could be today or it could be in 100 years. But you got until then to get it right. But that's not the gospel. But apparently, I'm of the devil for saying Jesus died for your sins, rose again the third day to impute his righteousness to you, and he had your sin imputed to him on the cross. Now, apparently, that's preaching the devil there. I've had one Catholic I was talking to. We were talking about children, babies, infants, and I was saying that they haven't sinned, so if they were to die, they would go to heaven because they haven't done anything wrong, right? And the Catholic said something about me being not worshiping God, implying that I'm worshiping someone or something else there, right? And I just repeated what they said, but I said, "Oh, you expose that you worship Satan, who would reject innocent babies from coming to heaven, to his kingdom." And they reported me to the moderators and administrator, and they put me on one of those temporary can't comment things that they do in those forums. But yeah, that's some name calling. But you'll have some of these people who, what they really mean is, we can say things to you, but you can't say things to us, right? Because I have these people who are very sly and subtle, and they'll basically call you stupid without saying it, right? They're like, well, if you had the proper education to be able to understand basic English, you would know what I'm saying and that it is true and that you are completely wrong, but you just lack the proper education. So, in other words, they're name calling. They're calling me stupid, right? But they didn't actually straight out call me stupid, right? And they'll do little things like that. I'm sure you've talked to people who've done things like that. Like they talk and they imply that you're stupid, ignorant, arrogant, satanic, evil, wrong, and all these things without actually calling you the names. So then you just call them out for being a prick, and all of a sudden now you're the bad guy, right? So they instigate it out of you, and they're innocent. And it's like, how do you think it's going to go when God judges us, who knows the hearts? And all this is exposed. This is why I don't get too worried about all the people who do this, because if they don't end up accepting the gospel, I get to be there when they're judged, and I get to see them have to face the truth. So one way or another, I win. You either humble yourself now and accept the gospel and be brothers, or you keep rejecting it and you get force-fed that humble pie, and I get to watch. No matter what, I win. But anyway, this next one here, he says, correct the Greek Tectus Receptus with the AV, that's the authorized version, the King James Bible, exactly as you would correct the Alexandrian text with the AV, always. And they take that as heretical. And I don't see how this is heretical. Some of these people, they worship the original text, but we don't have the original text in Hebrew or Greek. And in the scriptures, we can see that when it talks about the scriptures, it's never talking about the originals. Matter of fact, in the New Testament, when they are quoting the Old Testament, they're actually translating the Hebrew into the Greek, right? So their translation, such as an example is in Acts, where Luke is translating what Paul said in the Hebrew tongue into Greek, is actually inspired. It's an inspired translation of what Paul actually said. So yes, translations and scriptures that are not the originals are inspired. Whoa. Crazy, right? Anyway, got to take another pause here. I got some messages I got to look at real quick, and then I'll talk about the warning that a lot of this is actually breeding. But I'm going to focus on this again real quick. All right, now I want to talk about the warning. That warning is what is to come, because history repeats itself. Ecclesiastes. Let's see if I remember the actual verse. I think it's 1:9. So let's go over here. There we go. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. So when we look at history, we can see that it's going to repeat. It's actually required. So when we look at Revelation and see the things that are going to come, we can better understand them by looking at things that have already happened. One of the more recent things to look at is Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. And it's very key because it's repeating the same history here in America. And I'll explain that. In Germany, before Hitler, the German people were a proud people, and they had a good economy. And after World War I, in a war where nobody actually entered into Germany, they actually kept everybody out of Germany. They were totally winning that war until America stepped in. At which point, obviously, they lost. But because of what was going on, the winners of the war put all these burdens on Germany to pay their debt. And all of a sudden, their currency inflated where they had to use a wheelbarrow full of money. Like, just picture a bunch of ones, five, tens, 20s, hundreds, and what have you in a wheelbarrow to go buy a loaf of bread. And they basically became this communist socialist government, and it was just devastating. And the people were upset. But not only that, there was weird things going on. One of those things was things you can still see traces of is weird homosexual things. A lot of weird things were going on. People say that it's because they felt like they were emasculated after the war, and they just channeled that into all kinds of weird sexual perversions. But eventually, Hitler came to power and started restoring the country, right? So people obviously flocked to him because they were in poverty, and all of a sudden he made the country strong again, and a new currency that was worth something, and started changing things for the better, and pulled them out of poverty, and they had the farms and the jobs and everything was going good. So of course they were like, yes, this guy is a hero. Just to understand why they looked up to him in such a way, because they were living in poverty, starving, people getting sick and dying, sexual perversion going on, and he pulls them out of this, right? But Hitler was doing other things, where he has the concentration camps, right? Where he's pulling all the dissenters away to these camps. And he's taken away gypsies and Jews and Protestants and homosexuals, sexual deviants. I'm mentioning the sexual deviance because it's something that ties into history repeating itself. And there was a guy named Erz Zundel, who was a German, who grew up during the war, and he moved to Germany, and he started preaching about uh, the Holocaust was exaggerated, and he actually had decent evidence to back it up, talking about how 4 million people didn't die at Auschwitz. And you can even go look there now at Auschwitz. It says something like less than 200,000 people actually died there. So that cuts down that death toll of the 6 million Jews down to 2 million. Not that that's okay, but it shows that he was right, that it was exaggerated. And I'm not sure if this is true, but that's just what some of the evidence points to, right? I'm not a Holocaust denier or revisionist, just saying, got a point there. But it seemed like what Germany wanted to do was ship Jews to Palestine. That's one of the things they were doing, was shipping there, and that's where a lot of the Jews came from, who actually established modern day Israel. A lot of them being shipped there from Russia and Eastern Europe, and a lot of it done by Hitler. He was actually sending them all there, and because of the deal the Zionists made with England to bring America into the war, World War II that is, it was a Balfour Declaration where England ended up taking the land from Turkey and giving it to Israel so they can establish their nation of Israel. And Hitler's ultimate plan seemed to be to get all the Jews in one place, give them their own land, send them all there, so that you can just kill them all at once. because that would be a lot quicker and easier than trying to gather them into concentration camps and killing them off slowly, and others are getting warned and running away. So instead, pretend to be their friends, send them to Israel, and then bomb them. All right, so that I told you all that. What does that got to do with history repeating itself and what Ruckman's saying here? Well, because we see similarities going on in America. One of the things I thought was interesting when told that Germany was racist was I was looking at the Allies and Axis powers. The Allies was the United States, Canada, England, France, Russia, all white Europeans mostly, right? Germany was allied with Italy, Japan, and different Middle Eastern countries. So there was a mix of the races there. I was like, that's weird that the ones that are a mix of the different races are the racists, but the ones that are predominantly all white are not. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Very weird. But what do I know, right? What do I know? So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about this Ert Zundel, because he was saying that America is ripe to actually follow in the footsteps of Germany. And we can see the economy starting to collapse. And what Russia and China, even Brazil, a couple other nations, North Korea, I think, and probably Iran, joining with BRICS and what have you, that they want to move away from the dollar for being the world's backup currency there, and it's exchanged for oil. And that's the only thing backing up the dollar. And we already see an issue going on with that. And if they completely go through with that, the dollar will be worth nada. So we're going to see the economy going down. We're going to see inflation. We're going to see the dollar be worth nothing, where you have to use a wheelbarrow of it to buy bread. I don't know if that's history repeating itself, but it seems like it, right? And then we have a rise of this sexual, quote-unquote, deviancy with homosexuality and transgender. It's interesting because a lot of the weird things they say the Nazi scientists were doing was things with like sex changes and all this stuff. And we're seeing a lot of similar things going on here. And it's all starting to look similar to it. We're becoming more communist and socialist, which is going to cause an issue with the economy. Which leads us to think of somebody who's already proven that they've able to work some magic with the economy, such as Donald Trump, coming in when everything kind of falls apart and brings in, I'm going to say, a digital currency, like Bitcoin kind of thing, except controlled by the government. And it'll be the new world currency, and he'll restore fallen America. People will flock to him. And I don't think this would have to take as long as it took in Germany, because we are soft. And if we just go through 6 months of rough time, where you're not able to get gas, you're not able to pay for the internet, a lot of these luxuries that we have, your phone and all this stuff, and food's an issue, getting clean water's an issue. If we had to deal with that for 6 months, and then somebody like Trump comes in and starts fixing things, all of a sudden he's a hero. He's amazing. And he would be a new Hitler. Because what ended up happening when Hitler got into power is he slowly made it where he couldn't be voted out. And he started consolidating the powers of the different branches of the government. So I could see someone like Trump doing the same thing, taking the legislative branch and the other two branches that, bad student here of the government, and unite them together, right? We got Congress, we got the president and the Supreme Court there. You mix all the branches together and give him the power. And all of a sudden, he's the protector from anybody bad ever coming in again. Except history repeats itself. And he's going to round up the leftists, the homosexuals, sexual deviants, and they'll be put in the camps. And the Christians won't care, and the white people won't care, because these are the people that have been antagonizing them and calling them racist for saying simple things. White people and black people are different. You're a racist! What? Right? You keep just saying that to somebody, they're not going to like you. And then when something bad happens to you, they're like, good. Even though they shouldn't be like that, that's how it's going to be. And then Trump, super friendly with the Jews. Right? He says even that he would be better off running in Israel. They love him there. And they do. They even printed his face on one of their coins for the temple. So don't be surprised he goes and helps out Israel, because they praise him, and he loves to be praised. So he's going to help out the people who praise him the most. And they really praise him, so he's going to help them out. Probably help them usher in some peace treaty, get the third temple built and all that going. But then he's going to do what Hitler did and see that they have a lot of dual citizenship in the government. That's Israelites who are Israel citizens are also American citizens who are in the United States government who are not in elected positions. In Germany, Hitler kicked all of the Jews out of the government. And that's what started basically the war, because then the Jews in America started putting up propaganda about how Hitler is evil. And granted, he was, but they exaggerated it to motivate the people to do something. And it still didn't motivate them until Pearl Harbor. So I see the same thing happening where, Trump helping everybody in Israel and all the Jews get into Israel. And hopefully that spinning is not my screen recorder messing up. But anyway. And then he ends up turning on them. Yeah. I don't know exactly what would cause that, but there's something where he turns on them. And I think I can imagine what it would be. Because they keep talking about him being the Messiah. If he walks into that temple one day and says that he's God, there would be one zealot, a Jewish zealot, that would shoot him. And that's when the deadly wound would be healed, and he would get up and be like, I told you I was God. But, yeah. I think you get the point. I think you should think about it. Learn the history of Germany before Hitler, and how it ended up falling into Nazi Germany. And a lot of these anti-fascists are setting up the polar swing into fascism, where a lot of people were not going to go into fascism, but this whole movement about being anti-fascist is just going to swing people over to the other side, because it's like WWF wrestling, right? You don't really care about the wrestlers or whatever. Some wrestling. Maybe you watch it for entertainment or whatever, but you're not really invested. But then when you got this bad guy who's just a jerk, like he's spitting in children's faces and throwing their ice cream cones on the ground, and he kicked your grandma, right? And he's just this prick, and you want to see him get beat up. Right now you're invested. But he just beats everybody down. Nobody can stand up to him. He even gets a gang going, and they all just beating up everybody. But then all of a sudden, you got the hero comes up, right? You got Hulk Hogan coming down. I'm a real American. Fight for one's rights, American. And he just beats him down. And you're like, yes! Finally, somebody punched that guy in the mouth and put him down. Well, it's the same thing that's going to happen with the government. It's throwing this propaganda going over to the far left, going anti-fascism. It's like, well, where was the fascism in the first place? And then all of a sudden, it's going to swing over to the right, and people are going to hold it up and support it because they're tired of the other side. And the anti-fascist movement is to end up bringing in the fascist movement. It's history repeating itself, where Hitler used the communist socialists to help support his rise to power. Not to mention false flags and other such things. And we see a lot of things going on where the Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all these movements getting paid by someone like George Soros, like getting funded for these people to go riot and do criminal acts. And it's to rile the people up to eventually get that swing. Because you're not going to get people to support a fascist movement. But if you get this ridiculous, over the top anti fascist movement that's just being lawless, you're going to support the side that fights against it and actually wins. I mean, I guess it's one of the oldest tricks in the book. It's like some human psychology going on, like super easy manipulation. It's kind of like two guys trying to pick up a girl. One of them come over and starts acting like an asshole and starts trying to force her to have a drink or go with him. And then the other guy, who's his friend, but she doesn't know that, comes over and intends to punch him in the face. And his friend falls down. It's like, whoa, man, and all this. And he kicks him around a bit. And she's like, oh, my hero, and all this. And she likes him. So, they end up going out and all this stuff. And she didn't even know it was a setup. Where if she actually knew the guy ahead of time, she might have not have actually liked him. But because of the whole setup to make him look like a good guy, she fell for it. And you just gotta realize the government is the two dudes, right? The left and the right are the two guys who want a date with you. But in reality, you don't want a date with either one. You don't. But one of them comes over and tries to force it on you. So when the other one comes as the hero, you naturally cling to them because they helped you from the one that was trying to force you. But yeah, just meditate on this. Nothing new under the sun. The things that have been is which shall be. That which is done is that which shall be done. All right. It's like even what Ruckman says. He goes, the only thing men learn from history is that men don't learn from history. It's a good quote of his. But yeah, that is that. I hope you were able to stick through it and hear me out. Thanks for watching and take care. And I know the video is going to be a little bit under quality because when I splice it together and save it as a new video, it's not as good as quality. But it also allows me to make it longer to fit on some of these sites that won't hold longer videos because they're too large of a file. It actually shrinks it down. You know, pros and cons. But anyway, thanks again for watching and take care.